Hello explorers, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to another exciting and informative video on our YouTube channel. If you are joining us for the first time, we want to thank you for watching. In this episode, I will be looking at the reason why Emmanuel Macron's African reset struggle to persuade anybody in the continent of Africa, why African countries have shut down their doors with regards to France's imperialistic foreign policy in the region. I will look at why France simply cannot win. No one on the continent is going to take its profession of good faith, neutrality, and partnership and brotherly love at a face value. I will encourage you to watch this video to the end because we shall be covering a lot of information here. So without any much delay, let's just dive straight into it. The bigger the humiliation, the more grandiloquent the relaunch. After a year that saw France forces conducting counter-insurgency operations against jihadist rebels handed out of Mali and also Burkina Faso by military coup, anti-colonialist street protests, and also Russia's presence and interaction in the region prompted France's President Emmanuel Macron to announce a fundamental overhaul of France's African strategy. If you look at other aspects, the words coming out from Paris at the moment include humility, partnership, and also investment, and now the key word is a reset that the country of France is aligning with regards to its interaction with African countries, since we all have seen why African countries have shut down their doors with regards to France's imperialist approach with regards to its policies in West Africa, specifically to French-speaking countries.
Jacques, let's start with you. What's gone wrong for France in Africa? President Macron wanted to transform France's relationship with its former colonies, but has had to rethink his approach after a series of humiliations. To what extent is this about Macron personally, not just about France?
No, I don't think it's just about Macron. It's probably about France, because don't forget that France's increased involvement in the Sahel region started in January 2013, when President Hollande responded to a call from the Malian authorities to stem the action of jihadist group who were going towards Bamako, and stopped that. And at the time, France's action was welcomed by the population. François Hollande was ecstatic. He said it was the best day in his life. French flags were everywhere. So France was seen there as an army of liberation. But as over the years, the security situation did not improve in spite of the presence of thousands of French troops in Mali, there was disenchantment in the population, and the Army of Liberation started to be seen as an army of occupation. And France's presence in West Africa was, in the Sahel especially, was challenged. France also is the ex-colonial power, so there's strong anti-colonial feeling. Then it spread to first Central African Republic, where the Sangaris operation ended in 2016. Then after that, you had Burkina Faso with 2 coups, which led to the departure of the French forces. And now the linchpin of the French organization in the Sahel, Niger, is actually a victim of a coup where anti-French feelings have been expressed, but it's difficult to say how strongly they are shared by the population. It seems we've seen some demonstrations, and once again, we sit behind the influence of Russia. And Russia is not the only country. Many countries are interested in that part of the world and want to undermine France, who has been for a long time, really, yes, it's true, the master of that region, the gendarme of Africa, security, controlling governments, but it's no longer the case. France's influence, economic and political, in that part of the world has never been as weak, and protests against France's influence are never been as strong.
If you look at other aspects, Many Africans were understandably skeptical as the French president took his new doctrine on a tour most recently, looking at a couple of years ago, with regards to his travel to Angola, Gabon, the Republic of the Congo, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, an eclectic mix of former French, Belgian, and Portuguese colonies that have big economic potential and are being heavily counted by Russia and China as well as the European Union. The days of La France, Afrique are well and truly over. Emmanuel Macron insisted in Gabon's capital Libreville. He was not the first president to promise an end to the post-colonial manipulation of African politics, with crony ties between the French elites and long-serving African autocrats. If you look at France's strategy, the French leader enunciation of a sea change in Francophone Africa's ties sounded oddly like German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's proclamation of the Zinterwende, and a poacher turning point in Berlin's policy towards Moscow's since Russia invasion of Ukraine. Moving ahead, Emmanuel Macron went ahead to say, "We have reached the end of a cycle of France's history in which military questions held prominent in Africa." Macron said, "The first French president to be born after the end of colonial rule. Henceforth, there will be no military bases as such, but new military partnership with African allies. The French forces on the continent will be focusing on training local troops in a conscientious effort to shed the mantle of paternalism and hand scrutiny with regards to his own perspective." Emmanuel Macron built his 4-day trip at a time around themes of saving African forests, developing agriculture, investing in African businesses, and also supporting a transition from fossil fuel to clean energy. He also went ahead clubbing in Kinshasa at a time, beer in the land, with Congolese singer Fally Ipupa. If you look at France's strategy, he steered clear of France's traditional West African backyard, where Paris' counter-insurgency policy suffered a despite setback in the region.
Do you agree with what Jacques was saying there, that this isn't necessarily about Macron and his personality and the way of doing things? Why is there so much anti-French sentiment in Africa today? I mean, what has changed?
Well, you know, France is one, as it has been said, is one of the let's say the most powerful partner, more historical partner, well known by this area. So I think that now it's no more a question of being a former colonialist power. It's finished this period. I think we enter into a globalization period. That means that, first of all, we have more competitors that are more aggressive, that are more easy to deal with, let's say. And also, we didn't adapt as French or European country, or even the American, they didn't adapt their approach to the continent, because also we have new generation, we have new needs, new, let's say, demand from partnership. And main point is the fact that now the population, they ask for sharing the wealth and the resources that they have on their own soil. So, and mainly what is always said, and you can hear that at any coup or any demonstration, is the fact that, the narrative is that they fight against government which is linked to a power, a foreign power, France or US, and which is let's say sharing the resources and the wealth, but for the government from state to state and not toward or at the benefit of the population.
Emmanuel Macron proved to say that our destiny is tied to African continent. If we are able to seize this chance, we have the opportunity to anchor ourselves to the continent of Africa, which will increasingly be one of the youngest and most dynamic economic market in the world and one of the greatest, he said, the greatest center of the global growth in the decades to come. Emmanuel Macron saw those words in the region. He was making a virtual necessity to say, at least, by shrinking his military footprint without abandoning key footholds in Senegal, Ivory Coast, Gabon, and Djibouti. France hopes to avoid further forced retreats from the continent of Africa's strategic corners is still not looming. Then, referring to Russia's Wagner mercenaries who have supplanted France's forces in Mali and also Central African Republic, Macron said he was not sure Africans would soon regret the paramilitary group's presence. He went ahead to say, but small crowds of anti-French demonstrations in Libreville and also Kinshasa were a reminder of France's tarnished image among many young Africans, as well as accusations of political interference that dogged Macron's attempt at a new start. If you look at France's perspective, in Gabon, protesters accused the French leader of helping veteran president at the time, Ali Bongo's re-elections campaign, a change he felt obliged to deny. And in the DRC Congo, he faced both public criticism from President Felix Tshisekedi as well as a protest by opposition activists during his trip. If you are France in Africa, you simply can't win. No one is going to take your professions of good faith and political neutrality, partnership and brotherly love at face value.
Back in March, President Macron said the days of Franc-Afrique is well and truly over. France had no desire to return to past policies of interfering in Africa. Do people there believe that that is truly the case? And does it even matter to what extent has France and its Africa policies become irrelevant on the continent?
I think what we're actually looking at here is less backlash against France and more actually looking at what has happened in post-colonial Africa. And this doesn't just include the Sahel, but it includes the entire region. And really the promises that, or the expectations that we had of post-colonial Africa was to have greater democratic societies, more freedom, more prosperous economies, helped by aid from the West. And that has not really happened. And of course, we've seen this take hold in the Sahel, and it's been against France because France is really one of the biggest actors there. But I don't see this as particular anti-French sentiment. I think that we can see this democratic backsliding happening in many other countries across the region because France is the biggest player there. It's the one that will get the most attention and the most focus. But for me, what is the most concerning about the events that have taken place and all of the coups that we have seen for the past 3 years is really that these are not actually popular uprisings. We don't actually know what these populations want. A lot of cases have actually been military coups. So what this means is that we're not actually looking for a particularly better future. We're not necessarily looking to say, okay, we don't want France, but we want someone else. We're effectively just seeing small groups of people saying that, well, we feel that we should actually be in power now, and it's our turn to take it forward. And whatever socioeconomic difficulties we're having, we're going to be the ones to solve them. But the thing is, these problems are varied and they're great, and there's not just one actor that's responsible for them. I think, of course, some of the backlash against France is warranted because we can say that from the colonial period, there were not good political systems set up and handed over. But these bad practices have effectively been entrenched by leadership in post-colonial Africa. These problems have gotten worse, and what that means is that we're just going to see more instability.
Marisa, I wanted to ask you if French policy perhaps concentrated too much on helping governments and not people, some of them dictatorships. I mean, does that explain at least the public resentment towards France?
Potentially, but I think that if you kind of look at post-colonial discourse in Africa, it has really focused on what happened in the colonial period and what colonial actors did. It focuses less on what leaders in the post-colonies have done. And certainly these leaders have entrenched these bad practices, but we can also argue that it's not necessarily France that has just supported some less democratic regimes, but also Africa has been the recipient of a lot of aid, and this, you could also argue, has effectively helped some of these leaders to stay in place and taken the responsibility and the burden off them of developing their own countries and not really held them to account. So, you know, it's a very complex argument, but I think it's one that is definitely worth having.
He admitted as much in his big speech. We are held accountable for the past without having been totally convinced about the shape of our common future. The decision to rebrand the African bases as joint training ventures was itself reportedly a compromise between advisors who argued against yielding another inch to France's adversaries as well, and others who want to shutter much outposts and also refocuses the armed forces on preparing for possible high-intensity warfare in Europe and also Indo-Pacific. If you look at what happened, while 61% of voters think France should stay in Africa because of the economic and security interests as well, also to help prevent mass migration to Europe. An orthodox poll for La Figaro based on our own research shows that a similar majority in pessimistic about France's African ties and doubtful of Macron's ability to build a new partnership. This may not be the last Franco-African reset as France continues to inch its way to regards to building a new relationship, as France has been kicked out from countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and most recently we are looking at what is happening in Niger.
Jacques, to what extent has France become the scapegoat for many of Africa's problems?
Yeah, I think that's the right word. France has is the scapegoat for all security, social, economic problems in that part of the world. France had claimed that it would bring back peace in Mali, but was not able to. It's very difficult. We see the jihadist threat is spreading all over the region, and France was meant to act as a bulwark against it and especially in the case of Niger, which had become, after the fall of Burkina Faso and Mali, where France had lots of forces, France was there cooperating with the national army of Niger. Was not leading the operation, it was there as a backup, but still, it's still seen, because it's France, because of our past history, our wrongdoings during the period of Africa, during the period of France-Afrique, obviously is the ideal scapegoat for all the social and economic problems of that region. And it's quite easy for military who want to overthrow a government. And we see that in Chad, it was not a popular demand for the departure of France. This coup was the result of internal feud. It's General Chani, who had been head of the presidential guard under the previous president, Mamadou Issoufou, since 2011, and stayed as head of the presidential guard under Mohamed Bazoum, and therefore, he apparently, from what I hear, he feared of being dismissed, and as a result, decided to stage a coup. And at first was touch and go, and then it was joined in all this in this coup attempt by all the commanders of the armed forces of Niger, who think or who bring the message that civilian governments, democratic governments backed by the West are impotent in dealing with the security and economic situation of the country, and it's better to go back to the old system of military rule, of strong leaders there, appealing to the patriotic feeling, which are fermented, which also have been, let's not forget the anti-French feelings in the region have been fanned by Russia, the Wagner Group, the propaganda campaign. But I don't think that in the case of Niger, Russia was behind the moves. I think it's more a domestic problem, and maybe Russia might be hoping to capitalize. But it's interesting to see that they have adopted a fairly cool approach to the asking for the restoration of democracy, not for the restoration of President Bazoum, but they're playing it soft at the moment, waiting to see how things are developing.
Jacques?
If you consider France's presence in the region, France hasn't invested anything with regards to economic partnership, infrastructural development, and also some very important economic aspect in the region. If you consider what China has done in Africa, it has clearly proven that Africa is not where businesses go and die, that African countries offer value, and if you work with the continent with regards to partnership and also of equals, you will reap out the benefits. France's presence in Francophone Africa hasn't gone down well. If you look at France's historical information and presence, the quality with regards to how France treats its former colonies at the time, based on colonial history, that makes it so difficult, and why anti-French sentiment is so high in the region. Hopefully that France will re-strategize itself again in the region. However, with the presence of France in the region and looking at what Russia is also involved in the region, France will not find it so easy to reshape its policy. China at the moment is investing hugely in African infrastructure in several ways, from Southern Africa to Eastern Africa as well, to Northern Africa and also Western Central Africa. France faces a huge task with regards to reshaping itself in the region, and France's President Emmanuel Macron, considering his presence, if you consider Macron's effort over his 2 terms, it has definitely shown that the African countries have come of age. Hopefully something will change in the region and Africa will begin to pick up itself and also reshape its future and charting new paths, looking at new partnership of equals that will work from economic to job creation to innovation and knowledge sharing. We want to thank you for watching. Hopefully we informed you with regards to the reason why Macron's African reset is still struggling to persuade other leaders in the region, and we all shall be looking at what happened the next decades as Africa charters a new part in its own history. We want to thank you for watching. If you are new to our channel, we encourage you to check some of our informative video on this YouTube channel. We shall be looking on meeting you in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye bye.